Live streaming is on.
Are the judges ready for the next speaker?
Yep, I'm ready.
Hello, I'm the next speaker. I put my title and my name in the chat. So yeah, I can start whenever everyone's ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, got it. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna start then. And you can hear me and see me all right? Just making sure? Okay, cool. You didn't have to cut me out. Have your friends collect your answers and change your number. I guess that I don't need that though. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. The #1 hit song in more than 23 countries, including the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and France. The winner of 14 ARIA awards and 3 Grammys. I'm talking about the abandoned man behind the 2011 global hit titled Somebody That I Used to Know, Gautier, the biggest forgotten artist of this decade. Do any of you guys remember him? I mean, he's so forgotten that when I asked my 8-year-old cousin, Ria, do you remember any of Gautier's songs? She said, of course, Goat Goes Bah. But really, it's quite sad. The dude smashes all the records and then just vanishes into thin air and becomes, well, somebody that we used to know. I guess we moved on from the most iconic song of the decade a little too quickly. But this idea of moving on from things too quickly extends far beyond pop culture. Broke up with your girlfriend? Chill, find a new one. Got a bad grade on a test? Don't worry about it. Just do better on the next one. School shootings. Move on. Me too. Move on. Black Lives Matter. Move on. Now we just have a bunch of problems that we don't have solutions to. This move on culture has hypnotized us into believing that we're solving our problems when in reality, we're just ignoring them. So today, let's see how this move on culture is so deeply ingrained into our society. Then we'll explore the detrimental impacts before finally not moving on and coming up with some solutions. You know what Ariana Grande's most iconic song is? Thank you, next. Thank you, next. Thank you, next. I'm so swear word grateful for my ex. Well, the way Ariana describes relationships seems like she's a toll collector, collecting dimes from passengers. Like, thank you, next part, please. But the unfortunate reality is that what she describes in her song seems to be modeling what's going on in our real world today. Becoming more popular is the idea of a move-on relationship. Simply moving on from one relationship to the next in order to get over a past one. Although this may seem effective in hindsight, in reality, it's just messing with people's emotions and avoiding the real issue. According to psychotherapist Carlos Carmona Goyena, moving from one relationship to the next without learning from a past one will not help one be successful. Instead, it just exacerbates the problem. But this move-on culture extends far beyond breakups and love. Following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, when Islamophobia haunted American citizens, We protested fiercely against the hate crimes, saw a surge of organizations rise up to spread awareness, and the United States Department of Justice engaged in extensive outreach efforts to discourage violence against Muslims. But now we've completely forgotten about that sentiment. We aren't talking about it anymore, and we hear nothing related to it on the news. But in reality, that hasn't lessened the issue at all. According to the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, the fear of and discrimination against Muslims is on the rise in the United States and is currently ranked as having the second most number of hate groups centered against them. According to this research, 75% of our Muslim population still lives in fear of being targeted and discriminated against. I guess our concern for our Muslim brothers and sisters ended after 9/11. We simply moved on. Not just Islamophobia, but one of the greatest American tragedies of all time, gun violence. Following Sandy Hook in Orlando, we waged a war to ban guns, but later we let ourselves be silenced behind the ominous politics and have now moved on. Yet 500 people still become victims to gun violence every single day. Newspaper columnist Dan Hodges tweeted, "In retrospect, Sandy Hook marked the end of the gun control debate. When America decided that killing children was bearable, it was over. Millions that have lost their lives have died in vain because we have moved on." And the depressing parts of all of this stuff is that even if we really didn't want to move on, as a society, we actually fail to take the initiative to fix things that are within our control. We read a depressing article on how California is suffering from a major drought, and then instantly move on, take a 30-minute shower, and proceed to read a life-altering article on Kanye West's most recent girlfriend. Even Kanye moved on from Kim so quickly. Poor girl. But on a more serious note, I've become a victim to this move-on culture personally. In 2011, my aunt and my cousin got into a major road accident, with my aunt dying on the spot, and my cousin, whom I had spent so many childhood memories with, suffered from traumatic brain injury and became partially paralyzed. It was devastating to see my entire family crumble in front of me, and when I turned to my friends for help, they gave me a simple piece of advice. Move on. Start singing, compose music, go on more frequent jogs, have fun, and distance yourself. And guess what? That's what I did. I distanced myself and I had successfully moved on. But in that process, I had become a terrible niece to my uncle, a terrible sister to my cousin, and a selfish family member that wasn't there when my family needed me the most. You can only ignore something for so long. If you decide to participate in this move-on culture, then it will get back to you, but harder. Now I'm grieving the incident like I should have done years back, but with something else combined. Guilt for not being there. As complex as this issue may sound, the solution is actually quite straightforward. Instead of moving on, we need to grow on. Replace the word move with the word grow. G-R-O-W. G. Grasp reality. According to research, 53% of individuals ignore and move on past uncomfortable situations. So by simply finding the strength to grasp and accept our reality, we've already won half the battle. R. Research. Once you've accepted reality, it's essential to research through credible sources to find the root cause of your issue and devise solutions to combat it. O. Operate by taking immediate action. For example, for the 106 Americans that died yesterday from guns, guess what? Today, right now, this very second, organize a strike and spread it on social media. In a week, who knows how many people will be protesting with you. And with media attention, it may expand across school districts, cities, and states. You may be the reason behind the next national surge of gun violence protests. And this time, the government may ban guns. And finally, last but not least, W, for win. We've won this battle. I'm confident that if we can grow instead of move, we'll solve all the issues that plague our society today. So, to Gautier, my most favorite singer, here's my song that I dedicate to you. We never really cut you out. We were just the victims of this move-on culture. We've always really loved you, though. You'll always be somebody that we've always known. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have 9:34 for the time.
Same, thank you.
Yep.
I don't think we have a topic here for speaker number 4. So if you could put it in chat, that'd be great.
All right, I'll type it in the chat right now. It's looking beyond our vision.
Thank you.
Judges, just let me know whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, perfect. If you could be one animal, what would it be? In 5th grade, our teacher asked us this exact question, and of course, you already know what I picked. The earthworm! Yes! Those reddish-brown slimy invertebrates, who doesn't want to be one of those? Yeah, I had no idea why 5th grade Sarah wanted to be an earthworm, but I do remember what one of my friends said in response. She said, "But Sarah, no one can even see the earthworm." And it's true. Other than seeing my brother every day, I definitely don't. So I said in response, "You're right. Being an earthworm would be completely useless." But the United States Department of Agriculture says that the earthworm is one of the most important creatures in our ecosystem, increasing water movement, plant growth, infiltration, and more. But because my friend and I couldn't literally see those benefits, we dismiss the value of the earthworm. And that's my concern today. We define value in our society based on visibility, on if people see us, how many people see us. Whether it's the obsession of garnering views on social media, or deprioritizing our values for the sake of appealing to someone else, I fear that we've begun to equate publicity with validation. As notable author Kiko Butch puts it, we live in a time and culture that values display and are largely indifferent to the virtues of passing unnoticed. So today, let's first observe how this obsession worms its way into our daily lives, how it detaches us from our true selves, before finally decomposing some solutions. Now, wanting to be an earthworm was not the only crazy thing I did in 5th grade. I once displayed a whole box of hot pink and neon green rainbow balloon bracelets on my arm, just so others could see my hard work. But that's actually the first way our problem pans out, because we validate our actions based on if people see them. In our current culture, if we don't get the interest, attention, or recognition we think we deserve. Whether we are high school students competing at a speech and debate tournament, retired adults, or millennials who obsess over brand visibility, we tend to file grievances. Our hunger for attention is no temporary phenomenon. Psychologist Dr. Golf MacDonald from the University of Toronto says that attention is one of the most valuable resources in existence for social animals. Being seen by others gives us a sense of belonging. The more people recognize our efforts, the more accepted we think we are. Why go to more tournaments? To win more awards. Why make YouTube videos? To go viral. Just a few days ago, I scrolled to a TikTok of someone saying that our generation thinks it's lame and embarrassing to post a video if we don't have at least 500,000 followers. And she's right. Views and attention have become the currency of our social media. But when we let that visibility dictate our validation, then we only deprioritize our values for the sake of appealing to someone else. And that's the second way our problem pans out. We obsess over what we display to the outside. But when the camera is away and we are our only audience, are we the same? It's one of the main reasons why performative activism remains such a prominent problem today. Because we so often define our activism based on how many people see us, posting stories, sharing graphics, commenting. But what about behind the camera? How many of us truly care about the issues we post about when no one is really watching, when no one can really see us doing it? To show support for the BLM movement, Amazon put a huge Black Lives Matter banner on their homepage. People saw, and maybe that was enough to convince some that Amazon was a supporter. But when interviewed about diversity inclusion on February 26, 2021, an Amazon diversity manager said, "We struggle to bring Black folks in because there's not a whole lot of desire to go beyond our normal practices." When we do things for the sake of others seeing us doing, we're really feeding ourselves cop-out methods to do the bare minimum. Companies show support for BLM, but do they change hiring bias? Politicians make promises to crowds, but do they go behind the scenes to fulfill them? And often when we chase after what looks best to the outside, we forget to retain our inner identities and values. During the start of quarantine, I saw a surge of high school nonprofits being created for COVID-19 relief, tutoring middle schoolers, selling homemade baked cookies, sewing masks. I felt an urge and pressure to create my own as well. But when brainstorming what my cause would be, I asked myself, what would look best on my college application? Such a simple question, yet so fallacious. While millions were losing their loved ones to the pandemic, I was asking myself what I could do to improve my application. But when did service and helping those in need become only for college? So many of us see the words perfect for the Ivy League, boost your resume, impress colleges, and without knowing if we truly want it, we chase after it. Behind what an admissions officer sees on our resume, do we truly care about the things we do? We want to constantly improve our profile, but when we validate our efforts solely based on if others see them, then we blur the lines between who we are and who others want us to be. One of the best basketball players of all time is Steph Curry. But what most people don't know is that his keen shooting and high basketball IQ weren't enough for college coaches to recruit him at first. They overlooked his wiry frame and unremarkable 6-foot height. He wasn't being noticed, but he didn't need it. He didn't need others to see him working on a signature three-pointer shot. And even though major college programs initially dismissed his skill, he stayed motivated. He just believed in himself and his talent. And with that intrinsic motivation, He's now the only NBA player to score 3,000 three-pointers on the court. Now, of course, not all of us can be Steph Curry, but we can all learn something from his mindset, to tap into ourselves and our true intentions before we start something. So how? First, before you take up an activity, imagine there is no external person rewarding your efforts. Before you start a nonprofit, would you do the same if it doesn't go on your resume? Before you share an activism post on social media, are you taking the time to truly understand the problem? Next, harness the power of invisibility. British novelist Doris Lessing writes that when invisible, we have the power to go with the flow of nature, of life, and the profound opportunity to make earth-shattering changes without anyone else even realizing it. American author Jim Collins studied 1,435 companies and found that only 11 had sustained growth. At the helm of each company was a leader with a clear vision for the future, working quietly behind the scenes to shape the organization. We don't need others to reward our efforts for them to matter. No one saw Steph Curry, but that didn't stop him. In English class, we're currently analyzing the works of British poet Emily Dickinson. Her enigmatic brilliance made her one of the leading 19th century poets. But in her lifetime, only about 11 of her poems were published. Emily Dickinson's greatest works came when no one was even watching. Let's stop the obsession with publicity and harness the power of invisibility. Do things because you really want to, because you truly believe in them. And that's when we can finally look beyond our vision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judges, I have 9:17 for the time.
I had 9:15, so
Yeah, it was about 9:15 for me as well.
Okay. Are the judges ready for the next speaker?
give me about 10 seconds.
Okay.
All right, ready for fifth speaker.
Awesome. Can you all hear me and see me fine? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm lost. I'm going to college next year. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. And the only adult thing I know how to do is laundry, and I'm not great at that either. This shirt used to be white. So I went to the wisest person I know, my uncle, a doctor. Clearly, he has his whole adulting thing worked out. I asked him, Bobo, how did you find your calling? And what he said next changed my life. John, I hate my job. I was shocked. I asked him, why haven't you ever said anything about this before? And he replied, I was ashamed. I didn't want the family knowing that I regretted one of the biggest decisions of my life. And that made a lot of sense to me because today it really seems like we diagnose regret as a disease. Everywhere we go, the bromide of live with no regrets is forced down our throats. Whether it's our cousins trying to justify their weird facial tattoo, or our president defending his abrupt withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, America has developed a professor of philosophy from Brooklyn College, Anna Gottlieb, coins as a no regrets cult, in which we've pathologized regret as an emotion to be avoided at all costs. But ironically, our regret aversion is nothing but a prescription for more pain. So today, let's discuss first how we act irrationally because of our paranoia of future regret. Next, how we suppress our regrets over our past. Before finally coming up with some not so regrettable solutions. Everyone has regrets. You probably regret giving up your Saturday night just to listen to a group of 6 high schoolers complain about society for an hour. But most of us don't ever confess to our mistakes. A survey conducted by George Mason University found that over 80% of American adults claim to be living an entire life without regret by making decisions they knew they wouldn't regret in the future. And that's actually the first way our problem unfolds. A lot of us are terrified of future regret. Let me ask you this. When you picture regret, what do you see? Maybe an unfulfilled cubicle worker or an old man lamenting his mistakes. Or maybe it's a young speech competitor who forgot to wear his pants during his speech round. We're good. You see, this dramatically negative depiction of regret naturally makes people paranoid. But as Professor of Behavioral Economics E.L. Winter points out, this paranoia keeps us stuck in dead-end jobs, college majors we don't like, and unhealthy relationships. And not only does our fear of future regret cause us to limit our own potential, we use it to limit others. In the medical industry, post-treatment regret is a sufficient reason to reject treatment to a patient, even if they explicitly request it. Take, for example, Holly Brockwell, who went to 4 different hospitals just to get sterilized. And at every single hospital, they told her the same thing. You're going to regret it in the future. And to be fair, those doctors might be acting without malice. But when we tell the trans person who wants to get a gender-altering surgery, or the woman with an unplanned pregnancy who wants an abortion, that we're afraid that they're going to regret it in the future, we're not helping them. We are weaponizing regret to control them. And that's sickening. When I was younger, my uncle used to tell me stories about how some patients, no matter how many test results they were given, simply refused to accept the fact that they were sick. And that's similar to the second way our problem unfolds. When we're supposed to regret some past action, we avoid it altogether. Nowhere is this as clear as our current debate over America's history. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with feeling proud as an American, but to many people, according to Professor Gottlieb, regretting America's history is seen as a complete rejection of America as a whole. Following the Capitol riots, no white guild signs were constructed in front of the houses of people of color in Montgomery County. The people who put up the signs said, people of color were making others feel guilty for being American. So this was just their way of retaliating. And this suppression of regret extends far beyond the confines of Montgomery County, all the way to our nation's capital. When asked about his usage of the phrase Chinese virus and the over 100% increase in Asian hate crimes, former President Donald Trump responded, I don't regret it at all. And when asked the same question, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy responded, I don't regret it. The virus came from China, and that was the knowledge we had at the time. to them, those statements were political calculations. Because in the words of Professor Gottlieb, admitting regret would hurt them politically. But for the millions of Asian Americans across the country, those statements made us afraid to leave our houses. Just last month, a woman physically assaulted a 6-year-old Chinese boy, yelling things like, "I know what you people do. It's all your fault." And obviously, apologizing for their statements wouldn't have solved all of anti-Asian hate, but I can't help but imagine if those politicians just admitted their regret. Would that 6-year-old boy have to have been hospitalized? Would the 8 people murdered in Atlanta be alive today? Regret isn't some disease we can get over easily. It could be chronic, but it's not fatal. When I was in 8th grade, my grandma passed away. I felt terribly guilty for not spending more time with her, but every time I felt regret, I shoved it aside. It seemed pointless because there's no changing the past, is there? So when my grandpa moved in with us, I avoided him too. I thought Grandma would come up in conversation and both of us would just feel sad. Well, one night, we were at the dinner table alone, eating pork noodles that my grandma used to cook for us. I casually remarked, "You know, I should learn to make these noodles with white pork." And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I felt a rush of profound regret. And then I realized something. My grandma might be gone, but sitting in front of me was my grandpa, who I could still get to know. My regret was my opportunity for redemption. Now I set up our time every week to cook with him, and turns out he's kind of hilarious. He really wants me to go on his favorite Chinese dating show because he's convinced that's how I'll meet my future wife. And to this day, I still wonder who exactly my grandma was. That regret still hurts a lot. And I know every one of us in this room has felt it before. An opportunity lost, a friend we hurt, a person we took for granted. And it's fine to feel bad about these events, because here's the thing. If we truly care about someone or something, we should feel pain when things go wrong. Regret isn't a reminder that we did badly. It's a reminder that we can do better. So how do we do better? First, we need to change our attitude. Instead of viewing regret as a shameful emotion, recognize that it's a deeply human thing to feel. In fact, psychotherapist Catriona Rotze writes that to feel regret is the strongest sign of a life meaningfully lived. Next, regret only becomes useful when we learn and make concrete goals to improve from our mistakes. Instead of saying, I absolutely shouldn't have done that. Ask yourself, why didn't I do that? And is it too late to do better? Is it too late to pursue a passion in your mid-40s? Is it too late to apologize to a friend you hurt 10 years ago? Is it too late to learn how to do laundry? More often than not, the answer is no. Because it's almost never too late to be who you might have been. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm still lost. I'm still going to college next year. I still have zero idea what I'm doing with my life. But I made my peace with the fact that I'll probably graduate with 1 or 2 regrets. Because I'll learn. I'll improve. And that's life. Isn't it?
Thank you. I had 10:12 for time there.
I had 10:15.
Okay.
I had 10:13. Close enough.
Ready when you are, judges.
I'm ready.
Hello, judges. I believe I am the sixth speaker. Just a couple of logistical things. Would you guys be all right if I timed myself? Okay, and you guys can all see and hear me fine? Okay, and one last thing. Do you already have my title and tab room?
This isn't justice.
Yes. All right, excellent.
Oh, this just isn't justice. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. All right, well, just a thumbs up when you guys are ready, and I'll jump straight into it. And just in case you guys don't know, you can click on like my little screen in the gallery view to expand if you want to see me more clearly. All right, let's get into it. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Bold words for a dude dressed up in a bat costume. You know, as a kid, Batman was always my favorite superhero. Something about enacting vengeance on criminals really appealed to my 9-year-old sense of morality. They got what they deserved. Retribution. But as I've grown older, I realized that Batman's brand of justice isn't really justice at all. To begin with, he's a billionaire, and his villains are mentally ill patients of Arkham Asylum. And even if we did assume that Batman was giving criminals what they deserved, one broken femur at a time, did it really help the community? Was building a car that could shoot rockets really more important than investing in welfare programs for Gotham's poor? And that brings me to my concern for today. We as a society are obsessed with the notion that people get what they deserve, also known as the just world fallacy, like Batman's justice. And it makes sense that we'd want the world to be fair. David McRaney, an international best-selling author, explains that it feels better to believe in fairness and reward, to believe in karmic justice. And on a small scale, it's fine, with phrases like, what goes around comes around, or that's karma for you. But it becomes a problem when we believe unconditionally that good things happen to good people while bad things happen to bad people. Whether it be automatically assuming our idols must be good people or seeing those less successful than us is simply less hardworking, we use the just world fallacy every day. So today, let's first inspect the crime scene of the just world fallacy. Then we'll gather evidence on the damage it's done to our society before finally seeking out true justice. First, the notion that people get what they deserve assumes that good things come to good people. But that's not always true. Take SAT scores. We assume the better the student, the better the score. But while it's undeniably true that students who study hard do better on SATs, SATs aren't really fair or just. According to NBC in 2019, students from families making more than $200,000 a year scored 30% better on their SATs than students from families making less than $20,000. Poor students are just as smart as wealthy students, but they're not getting the scores they deserve. It's simple. When good students aren't getting good scores, that's not justice. A very similar narrative surrounds income inequality in America. America is supposed to be a land of opportunity, a free market, fair game. But while once again it's true that working diligently in America will give you a better chance at economic success, the American dream is still inaccessible to millions. Peter Tennant, an economist at MIT, explains that for the average American to escape from poverty, they must work for 20 years without financial crisis or accident. They must navigate a biased education system, poor job opportunities, and subpar standards of living. And even when that's done, even the most diligent and hardworking individuals can see their progress erased by slight misfortune. What's worse? A study by Aaron Godfrey, an NYU professor of psychology, found that telling poor people the world is fair had a negative impact long-term on their self-esteem. Why? Because when we set up good people for failure and tell them it's fair, they begin to think that they themselves are the problem. In addition, the idea that people get what they deserve has contributed to a venomous idea that bad things happen to bad people. Take the opioid crisis in America. For decades now, the American public has been told that drug addiction is a choice. Ronald Reagan, a pioneer of the war on drugs, called drugs a temptation, told us to just say no. And yet 35 years later, we're still throwing those addicted to drugs in jail, promoting a narrative that drug addicts deserve to be punished. Drug addiction often isn't even a choice. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, doctors and hospitals have been overprescribing opioids for decades to make more of a profit. And the result? 80% of those addicted to heroin started with prescription opioids. Talk about a gateway drug. Opioid addicts aren't bad people, and yet we've blamed them for the sins of corporations. We've treated them like villains. Finally, the idea that bad things happen to bad people has been used to justify instances of police brutality and decrease sympathy for victims of police violence. Our criminal justice system centers on a narrative of individual responsibility, essentially telling us that criminals invite worse treatment. If this sounds abstract, you've heard it before. You want to stay safe? Don't break the law. Follow instructions. Comply with the police. And thus the idea is planted in all of us that if you're a good citizen, you'll receive nice treatment from the police. And the opposite, if you're a criminal, it's perfectly acceptable to strip you of your basic human rights. The justification for Breonna Taylor's brutal murder? Her boyfriend had a minor criminal history, didn't comply with officers who shot him and Taylor through their closed front door. And for George Floyd, much of the same. An allegedly fake $20 bill, another minor criminal history, and drug addiction. See, police perception of an individual can dictate whether a person of color deserves to live or die, based solely on whether the police see them as good or as a criminal, as a threat. And thus, we've even turned victims into villains. I've experienced the costs of the just world fallacy firsthand. My uncle, who works as a university professor, was diagnosed with cancer, leukemia, in 2015. After months of grueling treatment, unable to work, barely able to eat, the chair of his department decided to move my uncle to part-time because he could no longer provide full-time benefit for the university. It didn't matter to her that moving my uncle to part-time because of his cancer would be straight up illegal. It didn't matter to her that my uncle was helpless to stop her, and it didn't matter to her that it would deprive him of the healthcare benefits paying for his ongoing care. Why? Did he deserve it? Indirectly or directly, she thought he was to blame. To me, my uncle will always be a hero. He's earned his titles. Loving father, phenomenal professor, fun uncle. He never asked for cancer survivor. It's so important that we think about what it means to be deserving when there are 3 million Americans without health care, when there are 24 million unemployed Americans, and when there are 11 million American children in poverty. Because no matter who these people are and no matter what they do, the only thing they'll ever deserve is our help. So we've learned that the just world fallacy, well, just doesn't work. But what steps can you and I take to change the way we think about justice in our society? First, we must stop making snap judgments of other people as good or bad. Award-winning behavioral scientist Daniel Kahneman explains that when we shift our analyses of others from quick emotional responses to long extended analyses, we often retract our sharp judgments of others because we realize that with a few exceptions, no one's inherently a bad person. And that's key to stopping the just world fallacy. Secondly, and more concretely, we must extend our empathy for others. A Duke University study showed a videotape of a woman being electrocuted based on her answers to a learning task. Those told to imagine themselves in the woman's shoes were substantially more likely to say she didn't deserve it than those simply told to watch. And I know that it's going to be hard for us to empathize with people we consider incompetent or even bad. But try talking to a member of the opposite political party about their honest beliefs. Try voting for candidates who value all of their constituents as humans. Try empathizing with hurt people, no matter the situation. Now, to me, being a hero is no longer about capes or caves or karmic justice. It's about knowing that there's good in people even when you can't see it right away. And that, I think, is truly just. Thank you for your time, judges.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had 10:35.
Yeah, it's 10:35.
I had 10:34 too.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful performances.
Congratulations to all of you. It was a great semis round.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Best
much
of
for
luck.
judging.
Best of luck.
Thank you, judges.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you for judging. Have a nice day.
Yeah, good luck.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.